I guess as you're the longest user of getting things done, what would you say what would you say has been the biggest lesson that you've learned from using getting things
Probably the biggest uh, lesson is that the music's not in the radio. That is, if I'm thinking that all the value I'll create is already in my head, then uh, I'm not doing what I'm here to do. And not only that, I'm not giving myself access to the things that really inspire me, called become a channel for cool ideas, neat things to do, great creativity. And so unblocking, the idea of keeping free and clear the psyche so that it's more of an instrument to be able to then pay attention to where my spontaneous intuitive hunches want to lead me, as opposed to, wow, my psyche's now been given a job that it's screwed up with, and now it's creating so much static in the system. I don't have the capability to either listen to what the internal intuitive process is, nor to execute on it, and both of which will constipate the process. So changing the game from trying to use a creative energy to just try to manage and maintain the detail and the ordinariness of life and not let that get on top of us, to be able to then free that energy up, to be able to have access to much cooler things and be more open channels for creativity, innovation, a higher level value thinking and energy that we want to, put our focus on. That's, that was my driver to begin with. And I suppose what I've learned is, yeah, we can build in the algorithms, and there is a systematic process that one can apply that without fail, it happens. I'm my own fellow student, trust me. I get bored, stiff, constipated, clogged up like anybody else. It's probably at a different level than most people, but I still experience that too. But then I have to go, come on, David, you teach this stuff, sit down, dump your head out, get it empty, clear up so that you have fun to be able to go draw or go write a new tweet or to go hang with my wife or go play with my dog. So it's, I suppose it's just that what I've learned over time is the universality of what I uncovered, and that there's no exception to it, and that it actually works for everybody and anybody. There's no cultural bias, no gender bias, no age bias to the utilization of this process.
Absolutely perfect. Another question that I know I've read on different forums and all over the place. One of the beautiful things about getting things done is that it's tool agnostic. You don't need to have anything to implement it. You can just use it with a pad of paper. But of course the question comes up at different times. What does David Allen use to implement getting things done?
Right now I'm using Lotus Notes, which is what our corporate email and sort of list management application, corporate desktop application for sort of how we manage things in our company. So I just use the list management system inside of that, which has been very much upgraded using an add-on called eProductivity from my friend and technologist for many years, Eric Mack, who designed that based upon the GTD model. But it was basically just a way to take, in terms of my user interface, how do I make actions? How do I just keep lists in a little more elegant form? But I used a Palm before that. I used a paper-based planner before that. Frankly, as you say, it is system agnostic. For the most part, the primary tools you need are capture tools and list management tools. So I need something to be able to capture stuff. For the most part, that's still low tech. So here's my note taker wallet right here. Here's my little desk pad right on my desk. It's got a few notes I haven't processed yet that are right there. Here's my in basket, right? So I've got stuff, my wife threw stuff in there for me. I've got a little bit of mail or whatever in there. And those are capture tools. So I do need those tools, and those are critical tools. If I didn't have those, then I couldn't trust what's in the system. So I need to make sure I funnel the stuff into the system. And then in terms of how do I manage, once I look at this pad and say, okay, February 7th and 8th. Okay, Marshall Goldsmith and I just had a conversation. He's doing an event in New York. Am I going to go? I don't know. I'm going to throw throwing that in my in basket, by the way, just so that I can make that decision later on, which is, by the way, a fabulous behavior and best practice, which is to trust that I'll empty out my own physical in basket, which means then I can use that in basket as my placeholder for any kind of random stuff, no matter where and when it shows up. But don't force me to decide that right now. If I had to decide that right now, I go, and what most people do, as opposed to putting in their own in basket, is they go, huh, and it winds up in a huh stack, which means that could lie there forever, as a huh. And then it starts to build this anxiety that there's stuff out there I've committed to, I haven't. But believe me, that in basket that I just threw that into is going to get emptied within the next 24 hours, which means I'm going to pick that up and make the hard decision. Okay, what the hell I'm going to do about that thing in February? Am I committed to it? Is it a someday maybe? Do I want to park it as a tickler to show up later on? But those are the kind of decisions that then I need to make. And by the way, no computer can make those decisions. So the only tool I have there is my forebrain. Right? I have to then decide about that. Now, once I make that decision, oh, that's a phone call I need to make. Well, then I'll turn to my computer and put it as a call I need to make on my calls list. Or I'll stick in my tickler file. I'll say, let me sleep on that. I'm, a month from now will be soon enough, and let me trigger it then, because a lot of stuff's going to merge between here and there, and that's when I'll decide whether that's something I want to do. So I have my systems and my list, essentially, and my categories to be able to park stuff that's the results of that decision. So all I need is a good list management tool. I use a tickler file, a physical tickler file, but I have an electronic one as well. I have a calendar, basic stuff. So it's not rocket science. I'm not sitting here with some big complex dashboard of stuff that most people don't have or don't have access to. I just am using it in ways most people aren't even come close to.
And I know myself, but by the way, my wife's name is Catherine as well.
Obviously, you and I are obviously intelligent, sensitive people who've found the right people to connect with.
Mm-hmm. And I know she's not as into the GTD system as I am, and she makes fun of my in basket because I have a rather large in basket because I put books and I put everything else in there. But so I can relate. I have the same in basket as well. It's a huge benefit to being able to.
Does she make fun of the volume of it, or the fact that you have one? What is
the volume? The volume, because I put a lot of things in there that I go through on a daily basis. I'll go through it, but I put everything in there because I find I can't remember anything.
Sure, but do you empty it out?
Oh yeah.
Oh, good.
Religiously.
Well, she only makes fun because you're demonstrating behaviors she probably thinks she ought to do. She's just not doing.
True, very true. That's probably definitely what the case is. But that's she has her own in basket as well, of course. But I don't think she quite uses it as much. That's something I poke her about. So.
Well, there's no right or wrong about that. It's it really comes down to I really don't have a sort of moralistic or even a judgmental aspect of this. Hey, I just discovered something that's a mechanical process. If you do this, it creates more of this. And so the degree to which people want more of that, called freedom in your head, no pressure, anxiety, nothing distracting you, nothing pulling in your brain about any of that, the more that's important to you, I can tell you how to get there with as little effort as possible. That's my game. I figured that out. And I still work on it. Is there an easier way? Is there an easier way? Is there an easier way? That's my driver. I'm always thinking that. So whether people decide to do that or not, it's up to them. I just need to make sure that I've done the best job I could to do a sales job of say, hey, most of you don't really realize what it actually could be like if there was truly nothing pulling on you. So people often ask, what's the biggest barrier to implementation of this process? And the biggest barrier from my experience is people's addiction to stress or their willingness to tolerate it. And that comes down to a pretty subtle level. Your willingness to tolerate 3,000 unprocessed emails or 200 or even 5 is, my willingness is 0. It doesn't mean I'm ever at 0, but it's like I don't take showers 24 hours a day. But if you don't take them at least once every 24 hours, the grunge factor is going to start to mount up on you, and it's going to start to impact your quality of experience.
Hmm.
So all I did was sort of raise the bar in terms of how many unprocessed things am I comfortable tolerating, and that tolerance is really what defines the degree to which people then start to trust their system or their head.
That's I had never actually thought about that, but that could be the difference between myself and my wife is our level of how comfortable we are with having things unprocessed. I think she's much more comfortable with that than I am. So that could very well be the determining factor there.
And
I've
it
never thought
could
about
very
that.
well be also, I mean, this is not to be so, I don't want to be sort of gender specific, but the truth is, generally, culturally, most women who've ever had to raise kids or had to manage a household were so driven by latest and loudest, called what's needed right now, and
Mm,
very short term cycles of completion, that they could just pretty much trust that life would let them know what to do. So they didn't have to bother too much about the other stuff. It was all gravy.
mhm,
In other words, there wasn't the driver called, I got to make money making sure that I process the stuff that's in my in basket, as opposed to, that's a possible class I could take or a thing I could do for the kids or whatever that I might have captured in there.
mhm,
So there may be a little bit of a difference in terms of the quality or the pressure based upon what may be landing in that in basket.
mhm. Very true.
That makes sense?
Totally makes sense. That makes sense to me.
And
Uh,
again, that could be very gender or family or cultural specific. So that's not a universal. The universal principle is, to what degree is it critical that nothing fall through a crack for you, versus, hey, yeah, a bunch of that stuff that's okay because my prime driver is X, Y, and Z. That's why a lot of my latest message. If you've seen my latest TEDx out there that I just did at Claremont College, a lot of that message is, look, we all move into highly productive behaviors when we're in a crisis because it forces us to be appropriately engaged. It forces us to let go of everything else and say nothing is as important as not burn up or not drown or not die or whatever. And so we then force ourselves to be focused on a positive outcome, to make next action decisions, trust our intuitive judgments about that, and just keep going, right? And make sure everything else is fine aside from that. So a lot of the message of GTD is, wouldn't it be great to get to that level of being in your zone without having a crisis, the pressure and stress of a crisis force you to get there. But it's almost like, how much pressure do you have that you feel like you have to relieve? That's why the people who are usually the fastest to uptake on GTD are the people who are in a fast track, who've translated themselves or been translated by their organizations into new levels of responsibility and interest. So, new managing directors on Wall Street, new somebody was just promoted to take over a whole new division the company just bought, and their system that just blew their systems up. I've just been coaching a couple of executives that every time they get, every time they change, they pull out my book and reread it because they need to rethink their whole systemic process based upon the new level of challenge that they've been thrown into, that their previous systems and previous behaviors, can't manage now what they feel, stressed about what's coming at them at the new level. So, but that's just a matter of, okay, now I have a new level of pain or a new level of something I need to do to be able to get clarity, get more streamlined, get these things off my mind at a new level.